Good to see you too, Bree. Just waiting for our recorder. So we have a motion on the books, and we have a question or a directive from
I'd like to make a few comments and then I intend to move a motion.
we have a motion on the.
No, I intend to move a procedural motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Procedural motion. Amendment.
And a procedural motion?
Procedural motion, yeah.
I intend to move a procedural motion, and I'll give the reason for it as I go through, but my procedural motion is that we close the meeting and adjourn it sine die until another day. And I intend to do that because it became very clear from the presentation from Api, who spoke in really strong terms on a number of issues which are fundamental to this process. And it became very clear to me that there is an enormous divide here, and one which we're not going to resolve today. And I think it's unhelpful to the RPC and the Council for us to have that discussion openly as we are here, because it's not going to resolve it here. And I think we should simply adjourn the meeting and go away and have some private conversations to try and resolve this. I was disturbed at the number of things that were relayed on behalf of, as I take it, tangata whenua reps, that there was angst and anger in Māoridom about this plan. I thought, obviously mistakenly, that with the RPC we had the representatives of tangata whenua coming to the table and they were representing. And that when we reached an agreement, as we did, on the plan, said we approved the plan to go forward, we had agreement. But clearly, what I've been now told is we do not. This was reflected later when it was referenced to avenues to the Environment Court and that there were going to be appeals to the Environment Court. Again, that says to me that we don't have agreement between the Council and tangata whenua reps on this plan because there are going to be appeals. Obviously, strong objection. So there's some fundamental things wrong here. I was also deeply disturbed by saying that this council had abandoned its treaty obligations. That is a fundamental charge against this council. I also heard that issues raised by tangata whenua reps had been dismissed with indifference. Those are the words, dismissal, indifference. I thought there had been no collaboration. The tangata whenua reps had no effect on the plan. These are the words which were said. So when we were going through this consultation and looking to compromise, it seemed to me that we were looking for compromise, and compromise is each party shifts. Means effect, negotiation effect, but I'm being told that there is no effect. So if this is the case, all this process we've been to has been to no effect. If that's the case, and that's the belief of tangata whenua reps, we have a fundamentally flawed, irretrievable position here. Fundamentally irretrievable. And if that's the case, there is no point in trying to proceed with a motion to take one path as opposed to the other. I believe we should simply stop and go away and have a think, and at some point in the future, when we've had a discussion to try and resolve these issues, we can come back to it again. But today, if we continue on this, it will just lead to things which will be said, which will be hard to snatch back, and which will do damage. I just think it's best for us to take a pause, so I'm going to move that the meeting adjourn forthwith, sine die, to be reconvened when the co-chairs agree it's time to do so.
Second.
Now, I need to be guided by some of the formalism
Yeah.
of
The mover,
Motion on the floor, have we not?
I could
The point of a procedural
Very
motion-
briefly, Chair, in a
There was a
procedural
procedural
sense,
motion,
the mover took an opportunity to speak, but actually a procedural motion, you don't speak to it. You
Yeah,
just
you
put it.
don't speak to procedural motion.
But to be fair, I felt I should explain what was on here because it would just fall on people. Otherwise, and as a procedural motion, it's usually a non-debatable motion and it's either up or down.
Okay. We have a mover, a second now. All in favour of the motion?
Is there any discussion? When
Someone count, please.
No.
Oh, I'll put my hand down, okay.
We want some
Sorry.
questions.
All those in favour, hands.
We should caucus, the Māori team.
Oh, we're in favour.
Can we
Should
caucus,
caucus? He's
please?
agreeing. Tania's agreeing.
Yes, please. Can we have a caucus of the tangata whenua members? It was a shame that Councillor
The motion's lost.
Barker
Okay.
put the
Motion's
motion
lost.
prior to the break, but I think we
Motion's
should
lost.
to discuss it
Sorry, you haven't
now.
called for those.
Those against, sorry?
It's list. Right, it's been-
23 hands on
Six.
Motion lost. Okay, motion lost.
There's only six.
The motion
Should have been able to ask questions.
Lost.
No, there's not 80%.
You need
Okay.
80%.
Well, just tear the place apart.
Okay, so we have another motion on the
Well,
table.
Mr Chair,
Sorry.
Well, definitely.
Chair, I too have a procedural motion. My motion is that the current motion lay on the table and that we continue the meeting and come back to current motion at a time agreed by the co-chairs.
Second to that.
Can I ask the question, would that enable the council to move this motion without a decision from the Regional Planning Committee?
Not if his goes through.
If that's the case, we'd like to continue this discussion on this motion.
Well,
We need some advice on it.
can I give you a personal opinion? Well, given where we're at, I would oppose the council making a decision on this immediately. That's what I would be. I can't speak for the others, but I wouldn't agree with this. We're just heading off a cliff here.
Yes, we are.
Fast.
And thank you for the,
And people are trying to, by carrying on the debate, people are trying to push us off the cliff faster.
yeah,
I don't understand it.
yes, it's us who's hanging there.
So my reason, Mr Chair, for voting against the second motion or the procedural motion was that I was looking for clarity around exactly as expressed by Liz around, does that mean that this will eventually end up at the council table and then the council will make a decision to move this to the SSP process? Despite the assurances provided by the Chief Executive, we have to operate from some position of trust. That's not the intention and would be inconsistent with what the RPC was drawn together for. I was looking for some assurance. My concern around saying no to the procedural motion was I didn't get any assurances that the matter would just lie, because it was indicated earlier in the meeting that this may end up at the council table and therefore be passed by elected councillors of Hawke's Bay Regional Council, despite the concerns of tangata whenua reps in this committee.
Procedurally it can't happen because it's got to be notified with 5 days of notice. There is no such notice of such a resolution. It cannot do it. The last meeting of the council is at 1 o'clock today. So there's no possibility of a 5 days notice unless there was to be a special general meeting for which it will be notified, in which no one's going to do that.
Chair, if I could just clarify my
That's a special
advice
general
to the committee,
With a special
and that is
general
that the Act is silent on the matters of process with respect to notification. Therefore, it's open to interpretation as to whether the council could indeed make a decision about the planned track in the absence of a recommendation from this committee, so therefore I don't think it's definitive either way, but I did remark that I felt that in the spirit of the Act and in the interest of good faith, this matter had been brought to this committee for a view, and I guess in the absence of a vote, as per the first motion that was put, we don't have a position either way from this committee, and that may be an enduring fact that we can't get a recommendation from this committee, and at some point the council would therefore need to make a decision in the absence of a recommendation.
Can I ask a question, please?
You can.
James, I'm surprised to hear your opinion that whether or not the RPC has the power to determine the plan process post-agreement to notify. And the reason I'm surprised is because there was no hint of that in the paper that was provided last week. Instead, in the paper last week, it went on to explain that RPC would need to make a decision on this, and then it proceeded to lay out the options. Now, if you're actually saying that it's grey or uncertain, or in fact you've got an alternative view, then that should have been laid out in the paper so that we could have discussed that and interrogated that. So I don't think it's appropriate to raise that now when what's pending is possibly a decision that might not go in favour of the recommendation from staff. I don't think that's good process or good advice. In fact, I think if you are of that view, we should have proper written advice to that effect, because I think that's a departure from the understanding that we've all had based on prior papers from council.
So, Tanya, I'd refer you to the advice that was provided to the committee some time back about one of the issues that we have with the legislation, and that is the ambiguity that arises with respect to what the council should do in the event of there being no recommendation from the committee on this or any matter. And we did identify that as an unresolved issue, and we identified that as a matter which would certainly need some clarity, either by way of legislative amendment or further clarification in a future modified terms of reference. So I would suggest that it's not a new matter. It's one which has persisted for some time, but I certainly concede that the paper last week didn't re-rehearse those matters. Look, I think the paper was drafted on the basis that we would get direction from the committee. And we do, I think, just have an ongoing, enduring issue with respect to this committee, its quorum, its size, and the 80% voting rule and our ability to get timely decision making on which the council can then act.
Can
I'm
I?
not referring to those issues. I'm referring to this particular issue before us today about the role of the RPC in determining the course for notification.
Yep. So the Act refers to preparing RMA documents, and so the preparation is one thing. Decisions about what's in the best interest of council resources, etc., that's not something which is clear in the legislation. I'm not arguing that it's not the business of the RPC. I'm just pointing out that it's not clear in the legislation, and it is one of a number of matters which create some uncertainty for council about what to do when it is, for example, rolling over hundreds of resource consents, and it has live resource management issues that it is having to deal with, and it has a plan which is stranded by the inability of this committee to arrive at an agreed position.
Well, we haven't determined that yet.
We have.
What I've heard,
We haven't.
what I've heard is that the resolution...
Chairman, I suggest this motion be put.
...still on the table. That's what I've heard. So,
Put it to the
can I
vote.
get clarification, because I can't see you or always hear you guys. Can I get clarification from the chair about where we are at process-wise in terms of the motion that was moved and seconded?
We have Councillor Curtin who moved the motion. Wishing to say something in respect to that.
Well, yeah, it's I'm proposing a procedural motion to allow the current motion, that is to proceed to a fast-track scenario, be put on the table, and that the RPC at some future point, probably after the current triennium, considers it perhaps in workshop and works through that issue. Either way, if the motion as it is lost, which is likely, then we're back to the status quo. There's no recommendation to council.
Can we clarify, please? Sorry, Neil. I just want to understand from James, just so that we can understand your motion, is if the current motion around fast track is lost, what is the advice of staff on what that means? My understanding is that the Schedule 1 Part 1 process, the standard process, is the default process.
No.
So if we don't agree to Part 5, the fast process, the streamlined process, then it is the Schedule 1 Part 1 process that would be the process by default.
No.
So can I ask for clarification from...
Well, the difficulty I have with that, Tanya, is that either this committee is responsible for making decisions about the plan track process or it isn't. And if it is, then I think it's clear that this committee does not have a unanimous view, and therefore for the council to decide to go down the Schedule 1 track in the absence of this committee resolving would be essentially the same thing as the council proceeding with the streamlined track in the absence of a recommendation of this committee. So,
Are you certain about that, James? Because
Well, let's test
I
it.
don't mind if it's put on resolution, but prior to the Part 5 changes coming in, there was only one track, wasn't there? And that was Part 1.
that's correct.
Yeah, and so the Part 5 is an opt-out of Schedule 1 Part 1, is it not?
That's correct.
Right, so if the Part 5 streamlined process is not approved, then it must necessarily be Part 1,
I
the
agree
full
with that.
process.
I don't agree with
No, I
that.
don't agree with that either.
No,
Well, I'd like the advice on it, please, rather whether people agree or not agree. I just would like clear advice.
well, I think it goes to the ambiguities that arise from the relatively scant drafting in the RPC Act relative to the extensive drafting in the RMA. And I think, we're into a situation where this matter is before this committee and there is not a unanimous view, and if it is the business of this committee to decide the track on which a plan follows and the process that a plan follows, then to proceed while there is not unanimity, or 80% as defined in the terms of reference, I think is in breach of the whole principles of the role of this committee. So I kind of feel like you can't have it both ways, which is...
Well, we also can't have it that if there's no unanimity here, that then the council just goes ahead and does what it wants.
Well,
How is that fair or equitable in line with
Well,
that?
Mr. Chair, my procedural motion is designed to avoid that scenario. What I'm saying is that either way, Tanya, there is jeopardy in the council proceeding with either track.
Exactly.
And so my motion is an attempt to achieve some sort of consensus prior to a reconvened meeting of the RPC to consider that. So that gives all parties a bit of cooling off time, a bit of time to reflect on the legislation before the House today and tomorrow. That may be influential on the way we think. So what I'm proposing, Mr. Chair, is let's not come to a definitive decision when we can avoid doing that, when the outcome's the same.
So I think I'm going to, hear the second of the motion.
I'm unclear. There's a procedural motion being moved by Neil.
Yep.
I'm not clear whether there's been a seconder.
No, there hasn't.
No.
I'll second it.
Okay. So I want us to vote on this matter, but I want people to be clear in terms of, can you read that motion out, please?
Well, that the motion on the table, the motion before the committee is put on the table pending a decision or pending a decision of the co-chairs to reconvene that meeting.
Okay. All in favour of the motion?
Aye.
Who's counting?
But we'll never get a decision in this committee.
Councillor Loss?
Those against?
Motion lost.
2, 3.
So that's
Okay.
lost.
Motion's lost.
Yep. Okay.
What were Tanya's votes?
She's not voting.
Not voting.
Abstain.
She can.
Can I suggest
She,
that?
she can vote. She just doesn't count for quorum. So if she's on teleconference, she can vote.
Doesn't matter, the motion's lost. It's irrelevant, the motion is lost.
No, it's not. You haven't tried it yet.
No, the procedural motion is lost. Okay? We're just trying to get the tally up the vote. Regardless of whether Tony voted for or against, the motion is lost.
So in terms of the motion that was up there, it's in three parts, as I see. Can we have it up there?
And we're still on debate about it, aren't we, Chair?
All right.
Yep, we're still on debate.
We're still on debate about the motion.
Okay, right.
Mr Chair,
I
if I
thought we
might,
voted on that one.
I've had my 3 hours, but Mr Chair,
Yes.
could I just respond to 2 comments or 2 points that Councillor Barker made in
As long as I can respond to his responses.
Yeah, well, I mean, it may not be helpful. I think we,
May not be.
let's focus on the motion.
Yes.
And,
So I can be clear, could you read it, please?
As written in the papers.
It's as per the papers last week.
Okay, thank you.
Page 34 of last week's agenda. Tanya?
it should be in the minutes.
No, it's on item 7 was in the minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, right. You can speak to the motion or against it.
I guess I'll speak
Tom?
to the motion. I must admit, I'm quite confused about all this, although I have to say in the very beginning, I do understand Tana Whenua not wanting to give up their legal redress, because over the last 50 years that's been their only last resort thing that they've had to do, especially Nikki. And they've done it quite often, and they've had to do it. But I thought in this process we had a different thing going on, and that was that Tana Whenua were in the tent, the whole Mana Whenua was certainly in the tent, not always happy, but through the whole Tang process. I went there and saw them there, and then when it came to our table, we've had vigorous discussion for a year on this, and we came to a consensus, and everyone compromised. The irrigators compromised. I don't know whether the people in our towns compromised, but Tana Whenua certainly compromised. And we voted, and the minutes are actually incorrect. When we voted, Nikki voted against, Toro voted for, and I presume you voted for RP too. I am talking to
with express concerns.
yeah, everyone, but nevertheless, we all voted for, and I have concerns about it as well. We all have concerns. It is a compromise, and I do sympathise with Tom's view, because when I move around my constituents at the moment, because we're all out there trying to get re-elected, I get all the time, well, Rex, you've been in there for 6 years and the streams are still the same as they were. You know, what are you doing about it? And, you know, we say, well, we're planting some riparian plantings and doing bits, 200,000 trees a year, blah, blah, blah. But actually, there's a heck of a lot of hooey and not a lot of doughy going on, to quote a Duffism. And, you know, they want us to get on with it. Our community, that includes our ethnic community, our Tana Whenua community, and our Pākehā community, they want us to start tidying up the waterways and start tidying up our environment. And this is a beginning. Now, so I'm for fast-tracking it, and that's quite big for me, because that that gives up the right of appeal for the people, a lot of people that I represent. So it's risk. But I just feel that we've done as best as we can to get, and I'm quite offended by some of your comments, Api, to be honest. I think our staff have really tried hard. I think all the councillors around here have huge goodwill and have tried incredibly hard to make this happen. But we're failing, we're continuing to fail. So I guess we have to look at why we're continuing to fail. But nevertheless, our community wants this to happen. The government want us to make this happen. We're going to look really silly if we get overtaken. We can't even decide amongst ourselves to make this happen. And the government's just going to come over the top of us anyway. So that's why I'm for, let's take a risk. Let's go for it. Let's get it done. It won't be perfect. It won't be perfect. But it will be 1,000 times better than what we've got now. So I'll be voting for this.
Any other speakers to the motion?
What was the question, sorry?
Any other speakers to the motion or against it?
Thank you, Chair. Another big decision before us, and I can understand and appreciate both points of view. I think Tom's articulated his arguments quite well, and so had Api, and so has Rex. And to me, it does all boil down to the issue that Tom raised right at the very beginning of this meeting, which is it's about giving up the right of appeal in this whole process. And the other thing that ties in with this right of appeal is, I think, is that there is a fear that there's going to be so much discontent with the proposed plan change that it's going to be tied up in the courts for donkey's years. Well, to my mind, that fear is indicative of how the tank, how much confidence we have in the tank consultative process. Because if we truly believe that it has been consultative and everyone's had to compromise all the way around and they're all happy with what's gone on, then there won't be bigger all appeals. And I agree with Rex that it's a risk. There's a risk one way and or the other. And as someone who sat on the other side of the table and had to deal with losing the right of appeal, I can understand that frustration and concern about it. So I won't be supporting the motion for those reasons. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to put the motion. We've been talking forever on the day, but...
Before you do, Mr Chairman, before you do, we're talking of Hetatonga, we're talking about Tamatea and our Karamu. And I've never ever, in all the months or so that I've raised it, anything's been done about the points I've raised. Nothing. We were supposed to go and have a look at the Raupare, go to Twyford, a trip there, nothing happened, nothing. I'm looking at page 2 of this document that was put in front of me. In the red, Tangata Whenua would be disadvantaged by not having an avenue. Waitangi Tribunal findings? That's got nothing to do with that here, it's never been raised in here. It's our settlement acts that are in here. Nothing to do with the Treaty of Waitangi's findings. We're talking to Parliament. Parliament. So you're cutting out that point of view. This is going to come back to haunt us generation by generation, because as soon as you start running water down drains and streams past the 7 marae we have on the Karamu, 7 marae, and one on the Ngariroro. So you can guarantee that once somebody asks for a discharge to let water down those drains, you're going to have appeals to the court in years to come. You're just pulling the chain and letting the tiko paru go down the stream. And of course someone's going to say something. I can't see why we just vote this out and go back to status quo. We go back to the Part 1 system and test it. If all our work has been that great, really believe in it, that it's that great, we shouldn't have very many appeals. in hearings. But to cut us out after all this time, we never had this trouble with Generation 2. The 06 plan that's in here, it was all over in 3 years. So I don't know where we're all coming from. That's where I'd leave it.
Yeah, I support what Peter's saying. Māori need the safety net that's provided with the Environment Court, and each of the Māori members here have to go through a very vigorous situation to be sitting at this table. They don't just put their hand up and then come along to this hui.
Okay, all in favour of the motion?
There's the motion, Mr. Chair, can we have it read?
Have the motion read, please.
He wants to talk.
We'll be here forever and a day.
We may be here forever and a day, but this is critical.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Members speak once.
We've spoken another resolution though. This is
Have I spoken to this resolution?
Yes, you did. No, he did. He read a statement.
Very
We
eloquent,
sat there and listened to a long,
Oh, yeah.
multi-page, read a statement to Tom's resolution. That's what it was on.
Yep, he did.
Oh, we're back to Tom's resolution.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Did Neil's part fail?
Yes.
Oh, missed that.
And the other one failed.
So is this resolution coming at the streamlining?
Yes. Yep.
Hang on, can someone read the motion, please?
Could I say something?
Still got to speak.
Hang on.
I'm aware.
Councillor Belf put his hand up first. So.
I'm just noting that I will ultimately have a right of reply as the final speaker.
Okay.
And Nikki hasn't spoken.
Yeah.
Okay. Nikki?
I'm just concerned with, on the last slide there, it was a choice between the two, the streamline or the traditional standard one. And that there's an interpretation now that if it is lost, that it's seen as we can't make a decision, so council may. I'm just wondering if we should get a legal advice on it, because to me it's either one or the other. So whatever motion's on the table now, there is that fallback that Tania's talking about. And I'm hearing, no, it's not. So I think we need a proper opinion on it. That's all I have to say.
Ask the question again, Mr. Chairman. Are we voting on whether it's streamline or not? Not two options put together?
Yes.
We're voting on what's on the screen.
Oh, there's so many words in from this distance. So a little.
The recommendation is for the modified fast track.
Which is streamline.
Chair, this may or may not be helpful, but if the committee wants to definitively determine whether or not this committee is explicitly recommending the streamline or Schedule 1 track, then a member of the committee could move an amendment to the current motion that it be notified using the Schedule 1 track and put that matter to the committee.
Yep. Or alternatively, the process is you put this resolution, and if it's carried, we know what the answer is. If it fails, then the committee has failed to agree on a proposal. Then you come back to it and someone can move an alternative resolution that we go on a Schedule 1 process.
Exactly.
And if that is carried, well, then we know what the answer is. But if it fails, then there is no decision. And therefore, there is no decision from this committee. And so therefore, council will have to consider what it means, but no decision from this committee. But I just repeat what I said before, it seems to me the issues here are much more fundamental than the process manage the plan. And it would be madness to go forward on a technicality when there are such fundamental issues hanging in the air. Madness.
Councillor Belford, do you have a right to speak?
I just don't understand this. People are not thinking.
Anybody else? I'm looking forward to this vote. I think we have spent years attacking this issue, including the last year plus in this forum in particular, with all the surrounding workshops and so forth that we've had. The issues involved were thoroughly aired. I won't relitigate here the case for the plan. I made a speech about that last time, and this group agreed to put the plan forward. So I'm not going to relitigate that. I think for this whole area to sit in limbo for an extended period of time is a failure, would reflect a failure on our part to do the job our various publics expect us to do. At the very least, we would be sitting in a situation without any of the measures that are in this plan that would begin to improve the situation. And further, we would be opening the door, in my mind, for the most serious challenge to the regime we're trying to put in place here, which would be we'd be failing to codify as quickly as we can, signal that we're prepared to do that as quickly as we can, the current cap on new water allocations on the Haratunga Plains. If right now we have just an expressed preference, basically, of the council not to do that. That, if I understand correctly, has no legal standing at this point, and it is our most fundamental, at the moment, our most fundamental protection against further over-allocation of the aquifer with all of the adverse environmental and other effects that would have. So I feel pretty strongly that it is that we have heard enough about the ins and outs of the issues. It's time to get on with it, and the modified track presents ample opportunity for all parties to weigh in, as I said earlier, including this committee jointly appointing the hearings panel that would play a key role in the process. So on that basis, I stand in support of the resolution.
Okay. Does the seconder wish to say something?
No, I don't have a right.
Okay.
Doesn't have the
So I'll
ability.
put the motion. All in favour of the motion? Against, it's lost.
I'm against.
Lost.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move recommendations 1, 2 and 3, which would read that the Planning Committee recommends that the Hawkesbury Regional Council adopt the Schedule 1 process to notify the plan change.
Seconds.
It's moved and seconded. Now, I do this not because I think it's the best way to go, but I think it's the most expedient way to go, because there is absolutely no point in us doing nothing and doing nothing for some period of time. I mean, you're coming to the end of the triennium, you've got a new council coming in, new members, and it will take time, and I would assume that you wouldn't get things organised or ready to reconsider this matter until after Christmas, and then unless major concessions were made, then I believe you'll be stuck in stalemate. At least if this motion is carried, you've got a process. You've got things moving, maybe moving slowly, but they're moving, and that's what I believe we've got to do.
Okay.
May I also suggest something too?
Okay, yep.
I know Councillor Dix moved a further motion relating to Schedule 1 process, Part 1. I have forwarded a similar resolution or motion to Anna Lee, which reflects the motion that was put last week, but which was reserved, and then we ran out of time. And I'm wondering if we could put that up on the board. It's in 3 parts, and the first part is the same as what Councillor Stitt has suggested. And I thought just to save time and to explore the Schedule 1 process a little bit more fully, if we could put those three parts up. So I guess it's
A resolution has been proposed and it's been seconded.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
So is that appropriate to then suggest an amendment? Councillor Willie?
Well, we can't see, what is the amendment?
So the first part, just checking if Annalise received it, I just emailed it to her.
You've seen it, Annalee?
3.1.
So I can just read it, it's only 3 lines.
I see Fenton's email.
Is it 3.1?
Well, best you read it out so we can get on with it.
yeah.
Okay, so it's that the RPC 1 agrees to the standard fee schedule of the RMA planning process. 2, agrees to align the fee schedule of the RMA planning process for PC9, that's the tank plan change, with PC7, that's the outstanding water bodies plan change. And thirdly, agrees to report to an independent panel of expert commissioners to get submissions and provide recommendations to the RPC on PC9. And that's in accordance with the terms of reference. So 3 parts. First one is Schedule 1. Second one is to align it with the outstanding water bodies because they're related to the same water bodies and plants. And the third one is agreed to appoint an independent panel to hear commission.
What's the second?
First thing, I think she's trying to. I think she's trying to plan change.
Does she have a seconder for the...
Well, just before we do that, I want to hear a technical answer from James.
I spoke to the seconder. We'd prefer keep things simple and deal with the motion as it stands.
Want to speak to your motion?
No,
I've spoken.
the mover has very eloquently laid it out. Thank you.
Okay. All
No, the speakers. Speakers. I have a question. If this process takes 3 to 4 years, which it might, probably will, given the contentions just around this table. So during that period, so this is a question for you, James, do we revert back to the current plan, the plan that we have at the moment, in regard to consents, new takes and mitigation issues?
Certainly we have to continue to operate under the current Regional Resource Management Plan 2006. The practice will be to continue to roll over consents on a short-term basis. So there's no...
Can you tell me why that would be the practice?
Well, it would be on... We'd make an estimation about when we felt that this process would be completed, because what we want is we want those consents being up for renew in a timely manner after this plan goes operative. So we'd have to make an assessment as to whether to roll them over on say, a 3-year basis or a 5-year basis, but it will be on a short-term basis, relatively, so we perpetuate the current high level of insecurity of long-term water use. The slightly curlier question alluded to before relates to new takes, and it is correct that the current Regional Resource Management Plan doesn't preclude new takes, and we're currently operating on the basis of the best available science suggesting that the allocation of new takes would be detrimental to the environment, so it creates a high bar, which is not to say, let me just slightly reword it, and please bear with me. We're under an obligation to receive applications for new takes under the current RRMP, so we are today. What we've signalled to consent holders is that based on the science that we currently hold that was developed for the tank plan change, there will be a high bar to those consents being issued. Effectively, that there will be, in our view, no new consents. But the legal basis for that all depends on the science, and if that is appealed to the court in the coming period, we will be required to front up with all of the science that was presented to the Tank group over several years, and we will have to argue the case in court. Once this plan is operative, we don't need to do that because a limit has been set. So in the intervening period, essentially we're operating under the current rules, but there is a little bit of nuance because we do have some discretion under the Resource Management Act to deviate from the current plan where we have science to suggest that we need to take additional steps to protect the environment. I don't know whether anything.
Okay.
It's not a good place to be in, which is why expeditious, agile plan making is so important for responding to emerging pressures, and it's why New Zealand is fundamentally in a problem with resource management, because our resource management system is far too slow.
Exactly.
Further speakers?
Thank you, Tori.
And then,
It's a pity when the government put through the last amendment to the RMA and brought in the SSP that they didn't actually repeal Section 1 or whatever, so that we didn't have to make a choice. It would have been nice just to have said, that's what it is.
That's what the bill being introduced to the House tomorrow will do.
Yep.
What's happening? Well, it's tomorrow, is it?
I'd like to speak to when I have a turn.
yeah, after Mr. Tapani.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking in support of the motion because the Schedule 1 is the most familiar to our constituents. It is a track and terminology that we will be familiar with when we're invited to engage in this process. The streamline process is new, and any ability to engage in that process for our constituency would require an education and consultation plan in support of that, so that our constituents could maximise their opportunities through the streamlined process, which, as far as Māori is concerned, given the timeliness in which we're able to circulate whakaaro, represents another barrier and a significant problem to open engagement. While my terminology was incredibly strong in the earlier motion, I do not think that our positions are fundamentally irreversible or irretrievable, because there are 9 tangata whenua members sitting in the room today. So we still have faith that there is an element of collaboration available for us to build on. Otherwise, in my opinion, we would not be attending. But we believe that we can find a way to work forward. I support this motion because historically we are aware of its process, and it will provide greater ability for us to engage.
Thank you. One more speaker.
Mr. Chair. Yeah. Well, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm opposing the motion because there's a certain reality that we cannot wait 4 or 5 years to take action here. What has already been signalled from tangata whenua is an intent to challenge, legally challenge, and it's challengeable either way. You want to reserve the right to challenge. You've indicated that you're looking to challenge. That will inevitably delay implementation of the plan beyond what is practical and reasonable. But further, it's most likely that the government will step in and override the considerations of this committee and the council. And that's the problem here, is that support of this resolution or motion is one where we give up our autonomy to self-govern and manage our own water supply, when the central government, as you know, are exceptionally impatient to get traction on this issue, and they will act. And that's the unfortunate consequence of this committee deciding to prevaricate on the issue and not get on and deliver the results that we collectively, every one of us around the RC, want to achieve. And that's my great concern, is that while Rome is burning, we are fiddling.
Well, there's some assumptions here, but I'll put the motion.
No, I want to speak.
Tony was.
I said there's only one more speaker.
No, but
You said to Tanya she could speak after such and such. You've got two, and then to deny the co-chair speaking right would be
The match has been lit.
that would cause another dispute. I suggest you
Okay,
don't
Karen.
Still everyone. I will be voting in favour of this motion. The key reasons are, as explained last week, kind of the Whenua felt that most of them felt that they needed to support moving forward, even though they remained unhappy with the plan. And that was in the spirit of putting it out to the people. The ultimate test as to whether or not this plan does the job. I wasn't involved with 7 years prior that Hawke members committed to this plan. However, as it's come to the RPC, we have been involved, and I believe it's our job to do our best by the plan to sharpen it up. And there has been concern about how 100% of the concerns have been considered, that they have voiced their concerns both in Hawke and with staff directly, and have struggled to get traction. For those reasons, I think it's important that we go through a full process and that Tangata Whenua, as other groups will reserve to themselves their right to appeal. Now, if we're able to resolve these issues before a hearings panel, that would be great. I hope that will happen, but if it doesn't, there's that fallback position. And that is something that Māori have sadly had to use in the past. I also believe that surely the council has budgeted for Schedule 1 processes for all of the plan changes that are to come, including this plan change. And if council hasn't budgeted for that and we don't have sufficient staff, then why not? Why wasn't that raised earlier? I don't think that is a sufficiently good enough reason to fast track this plan. The only time I could see fast tracking of the plan would be appropriate is if there really was truly broad agreement from diverse groups in the sector, diverse sectors in the community to the plan, and I don't see that and I don't hear that at this point. So for that reason I was supporting the motion. I would have liked the plan to be aligned to the outstanding water bodies timeframes that they could be put together, and that might have resulted in efficiencies for council staff. But I also note that the appointment or recommendation around the appointment of hearings panel members is a right reserved to the RPC, so I'm not worried about that. So in short, I support this motion.
Last speaker.
Thank you, Chair. I hate to oppose this, but I'm such a strong supporter in fast tracking that I feel I must oppose this motion. And it's on the basis that we've already put this community into a bit of doubt, and that it hasn't really filtered in poor confidence, but certainly if we start to not renew consents or just roll them over temporarily, and if we don't have any new consents, and if we don't look closely at mitigation issues for 4 to 5 years, you will see a major impact in our economy. And let me just take this into really basic things. How would you expect a new orchardist or an existing orchard to go onto a new piece of land, or even roll over his consent on his orchard for a short period of time, a period of say 4 years, when he's investing $200,000 a hectare for an orchard which he's hoping going to be there for 15 to 20 years? It's just not. The banks won't back it. It's just not tenable to put an economy as vibrant as the economy is in Heratonga under this kind of risk. And I suggest to you that it's irresponsible to do that. And so if you go ahead with this and it lasts and everyone's yelling at each other for the next 5 years, economic development in this region will stall. And that means jobs. I represent the people of Havelock, Hastings and Flaxmere. And you know where the jobs will go first, don't you? They will go from Flaxmere first. And that's what that economist told us, the economist who came here, Dr. Cole. And he's right. Anyone who knows anything about how an economy works knows that this 4-year process of not properly rolling over consents will have that kind of impact. And I also suggest to you that you will have litigation because people of the community won't stand for this. They're not going to stand for it. So you're putting a lot of things at risk here, and it's easy for us to sit around this table and have a chit-chat like this and yell at each other and then go and have a cup of tea. But this is real people, real lives out there that you are about to affect. So I'm going to vote against this.
Okay, put the motion. All in favour of the motion?
Oh, hang on. Write a reply.
Yes.
Well, I thought you were okay. Okay, all yours.
All right. Well, look, I'd encourage people to do what I've done, and that is swallow my pride,
Compromise last week.
compromise for the betterment of this committee and this council. I don't agree with the dire predictions of the chairman. Nothing changes while we go through this process. So just finally, I would say that if this resolution is not passed, if it fails, then this committee has failed. And in fact, the new regional council has a real serious problem on its hands.
Thank you. Okay, we put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Hands up.
And I'm voting in favour, Toro.
Sorry?
I'm voting in favour, but I
Yes.
can't put my hand up.
Yeah, oh, fair enough, but I did hear you. Got that? Yeah. Against? Four. Fails. So the motion fails. Abstain.
No, sorry.
No.
It's passed if there's 14, because there's 18.
Okay.
But
Abstain.
oh, there's an abstention. So
No, it's lost.
Nearly 17, I believe.
Abstain.
Known you as a person.
Sorry?
I've never known you as a person to sit on
No, I will explain exactly what my position was, but Chair wanted to get...
You can do it over a beer
So
later
13
on.
for, 4 against and 1
is-
abstention.
So just to go through it, 17 in the room, because
We're not to count Tanya.
And Tony?
Pity isn't counted, but Tanya is. That takes us to 18.
She's
and
on
then to
quorum.
get...
There's
No, to
17.
get the quorum. We've got quorum. So
18.
18 to vote, and we need 14 to get to the 80%
We only have 17
threshold.
members.
And we don't, because we had 4 against and 1 abstention, so we only had 13 in favour.
So 13 doesn't make the 80%.
Correct.
So it failed.
Correct.
So sorry, is it passed or lost?
Lost.
Lost, okay.
It's lost.
All right, we've got a problem.
No, I don't agree with that. We just have to go and have a think.
So at this point, I will depart.
Meeting's closed.
No, there's another chairman here.
We did have another item.
I had another
Which is-
prior appointment.
He's not having a hissy fit, he's just leaving.
Oh, I thought he was throwing his toys out and leaving. I thought,
He's doing a Fenton.
I'm going to advocate for disability rights at the moment. It's an appointment I had
I
for
didn't want to cheer.
6 months. So
Okay.
they are equally as important.
Tell us.
Yeah, we have presented the uncontentious
no such
changes
thing.
to the terms of reference
No such thing.
previously discussed.
And we didn't do the minutes either.
No, we didn't do the minutes. We'll do the minutes now. Yeah, where are those minutes?
We've got some errors in the, who was against?
Here they are.
Page 7.
Yeah, so we'll do the minutes. So are there any comments on the minutes of the previous meeting?
Page 7, the movers and it's against are incorrect.
Yeah, that's right, I saw that too. So on page 7,
They didn't call for division either, and Tora voted in favour.
Yeah. So,
I
yeah.
think that.
Beg your pardon,
Yeah,
what minutes are we talking
We're
about?
talking about the minutes of the last regional planning. Toro didn't present the minutes.
Not for last week, but the week before.
Yeah, it's the minutes of the meeting of the 18th of September. Yeah, last week.
These ones.
Stuck them away. I thought we weren't
So
addressing.
Toro did vote in favour, didn't
Yeah, he voted in favour. So the minutes need to be corrected to say that there was only one against and one abstained. That was Peter, and Toro voted for.
You need, but they didn't call for division, so.
No,
you
so
need
it didn't
to
call for
specify it,
division.
Because I think.
No, so we don't need to put the names in.
You can only write the names in if there was a division called
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, that's right.
And so if it's no division called for, it's either carried or lost.
Yeah.
So I just don't understand this minute taking.
I think there was a division called for, though. Well, there was certainly a show of hands.
There's a show of hands, and on the basis of that, the chair declared how it was
amendment.
carried. But for a division, to identify who it is, you call for a
With that
division.
amendment, yeah, thank you, Councillor. With that amendment, do we have someone to move that the minutes are correct?
Another amendment. if
Another
I may.
amendment?
Yes, please.
Happy?
Can we add to, on page 4, 1.2, there are two things missing from the statement. One around the concerns for tangata whenua and where this plan gives effect to the concerns of tangata whenua. And also our reliance on the Schedule 1 process to enable the ability to engage at a later date. It seems to focus only on the stream flow. There were comments made at last week's meeting outlining a number of concerns, not just stream flow. And from my point, I'd like to see those 2 points.
I think that was what the wording was of the amendment that Tanya put up, though. That's not a record of any discussion that was had.
Oh.
Tanya put up a motion, which was that was wording of the motion.
That's
Thank
right.
you. I'll retract.
We have a mover?
Revisionist.
Only today.
Again, Peter, all those in favour?
Aye.
Minutes of the last meeting are carried
twice
with
today.
those amendments. Now, what are we doing, Jim? Oh, the terms of reference. Page 13.
So, just to explain the recommendations, Chair, 3.1 is the minor corrections which were identified in February as having been, earlier in the year as having been.
Sorry, could you speak into the microphone?
Sorry, Tanya. So 3.1 recommends that the committee agrees that the minor matters previously identified as being uncontentious be made to the terms of reference, and then those more contentious matters set out under 3.2, which are all very familiar to us all, are set aside for future consideration.
I'll move, Chair.
Whole lot.
Can I?
With the amendments?
Can we
Hold it. You're looking like you're ready for lunch, Phil. We're going to take some questions.
Ready to have a 10-minute dissertation.
Paul, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Is there any particular reason why we've, in the amended, the strike-through version, we've got issues that we've got wording in there, like there are some matters that are yet to be fully agreed upon and will require further amendment to the terms of reference in due course. That's just a statement of something. It's not actually you've got that too, and under 3.1 you've got editor's note revision of these. These are either the terms of reference or are not.
Sorry, so the editor's notes are not to be contained within the terms of reference, at least that's my understanding. They are for the ease of reading and understanding.
Well, comprehension of councillors updates where we got to. So when they are formed in the terms of reference, all those editorial notes will drop out. That's standard practice.
Okay, that's for.
It's incredibly difficult. We're dealing with a marked up. We're dealing with multiple documents that we're trying to explain through one document, and so.
So we don't have the markups. People will say, "Oh, why is this changed?" So you put the changes in. People say, "Well, why have we got the markups in here?"
Thank you, Councillor Barker. I sense some frustration coming from you. Tanya, did you wish to speak?
Yes, I do. I've had a look and I'm comfortable with the changes that have been proposed, and thank you to Gavin for persevering through what was a very dry and boring task. But I do note that Gavin has put in his paper suggested dispute resolution process, which is the only thing that is now missing from the draft terms of reference that we're required to have under the Act. So to be fully compliant with the Act, I would suggest that we adopt the dispute resolution clause, which I think is in paragraph 16 of your paper, if I could find it.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a draft dispute resolution process, and as many people will know who've dealt with these before, it doesn't really have anything that's particularly binding. It just sets out a process for us to have further discussions if there is a dispute, either between members of the RPC or between the RPC and council. So my suggestion is that we include that dispute resolution clause. It seems stipulated. I don't know if anyone had a better suggestion, but in any event, I don't think it's contentious in any way, but it would be useful to have the dispute resolution clause in the terms of reference. So I'd like to see it inserted and that the resolution be amended to include it.
Well, that's beyond what we had proposed. Secondly, I think that disputes resolution...
I can hear you.
So that's beyond what was proposed for the meeting, so I'm a bit nervous about that. Secondly, the disputes resolution process in there doesn't actually lead to a resolution of dispute at all, so it's a misnomer. And I wouldn't want it in there because it misleads people to believing we've got a disputes resolution process when we don't. And so I'd much rather have something which is real.
Well, if I can respond to that, I didn't draft this particular one. I think staff drafted this, but I've seen many dispute resolution processes which set out a process to try and resolve a dispute, but which don't always definitively resolve. It just sets out who will do what, usually by when, so that it gets underway. But there's no binding arbitrator or anything similar to that.
I'm just expressing, by way of a private conversation between you and I here, is that I'm going to be against that because I just think it's all the words and means nothing.
Just hold, Tony. Does anyone else have a view on that?
Can I just make a comment from a staff perspective? Because I mean, I think the sort of the byline here is perhaps fool's rush in where angels fear to tread, and I think given some of the concerns that have been expressed around the table today, it was the weight and importance of a disputes resolution actually is very fundamental and is very could be very important matter, and so that's why we effectively have parked it out here and left it for the politicians to decide whether it's in or out.
So I need other politicians, which is all of you, to comment one way or another, so we can get a bit of a feel for it. Nobody. Tanya, I'm not getting a lot of support, Tanya. I think we just might leave it for the moment and just run with what we've got here.
Which is nothing. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I was just saying it's an opportunity to put something in. It might not be perfect, but it certainly doesn't result in anything binding. It just expresses an intention to have further discussion and try and resolve it within a time frame. But if people aren't comfortable with that, then that's fine. I'm just pointing it out.
Okay, any other discussion? Uppy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I agree with the value as represented by Tom of having some clarity around the disputes process, but I've learned from experience that designing that by committee is not the best approach. So I'm quite happy to leave it as it is on the table and look for opportunities to grow a disputes process in the future.
Okay, look, we have the recommendations there.
We have a mover and a seconder.
Mover and a seconder. Everyone seems to be quite comfortable with them. Do we have a mover? Everyone's spent after their last dissertations.
All we want is freedom.
I'm happy to move it if no one else.
Thanks, Tanya. Do we have a seconder?
Oh, second.
thanks. We have a seconder. Do you have to speak further, Tanya?
Absolutely not.
Neil, do you?
Yeah, for the next 10 minutes, Mr Chair.
Yeah, I figured.
I move an extension of time for the council before he starts.
No, it's fine.
And do we have any other speakers? Otherwise, all those in favour of the recommendations as presented? Aye. Against? It's carried unanimously. And that's all the matters for our agenda, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think you should close with a rousing speech.
No, we won't be closing. We might. We're going to close with Petty giving us a rousing speech.
A rousing speech.
Petty.
Petty.
E piri. Ano ho mai koe kai wanginui ki tēnei o ngā komiti whakahaere. Kia ora. O tā koe tukuna atu ki a koe. Kia koe rā tēnei o ngā honore kia whakakapi ai tēnei o ngā huinga nei. Me ki rā tō tāua nei rangatira e no hono hona. O tukuna atu ki a koe rā e a koe te rangatira.
Me noi tātou e te māngai me ngāne herapono e te toka turu tapu. Ka te tūmānu koutou ki wanginui ki tēnei whakamumiti o mātou. E tātari ngā kupu katoa e whakapuakina i roti tō koutou kororiatanga. Ko tēnā ki te tīmatanga rā me te whakaotinga mai a mātou e tūmanaku nei roti tō koutou kororiatanga. Tēnā mākoenu ki te māngai hei tau tuka mai ai anei a ake nei ai e te matua. Te tamata i rua tapu me ngāne herapono me te māngai. Tēnei mātou te whānau e pai nei ke te inoi atu ki te whakawheta atu ki au koe. Mo tini manaka ki tanga ku hia mai rungi a mātou mai te timatanga o tēnei o tātou hui hunga. Taino mai ki te haoro tēnei ra. Tēnei mātou ke te inoi atu ki a koe. Kia noho tata mai huki kia mātou i ngā wākatoa. Ke pātika, ke pāpono hoki ngā ua tātou mai. Ki te kaupapa kei muhi a mātou. Whakamāmātia hoki ngā tātou mahatanga e wanginui a tātou. Whakakotahi mai hoki ngā tātou whakaro. Ke puta ake, ke puta pai ake ki te kaupapa, ko whārike hia. A tēnei mātou ke te inoi atu ki a koe. Ai ngā wākatoa whakatoa ngia mai ki te hātoa wairu a tapu. I roto hoki o mātou mahi katoa. A te mutunga mai ka kiti ai hoki koe tōu nei hia tapu. I roti o mātou mahi katoa. Tēnā whakaungia mātou i roti tā koutou aroha noa. Pai here tia no mātou ki te rangi māri a rai ngā wākatoa. Tēnā mākuen huki te māngai hei tau tuko mai. Ai anei a kene ai. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Peri.
I'm heading over there. What time's
I just think it's safe.